Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at round number 4 of the Norway chess tournament being held here in Stavanger. Now, after a very difficult defeat yesterday against the current world champion, Gukesh Domaraju, today I am back in action with the white pieces against Wei Yi from China. So after the tough loss yesterday, my goal today is generally to be solid, try to play for a small advantage, and not take too much risk. So I open with the move d4. We get knight f6, c4, e6, and now I play the move g3. As those of you who are watching the game live know, this is what is called the classic Catalan opening, or to make the joke, the separatist attack. So, when I play g3, the goal here is to go for the fianchetto with the bishop on the long diagonal. Many prominent players, including one of the GOATs of all time, Garry Kasparov, have played this on many occasions. So we get d5, bishop g2, bishop e7, here I play knight f3, and we get castles, and I play the move knight c3. Now, this is a variation I played in the American Cup in St. Louis a couple of months ago in one sole game against Lenier Dominguez. That game would end in a draw, but I thought, why not give it a go again? So I play knight c3. Wei Yi takes, I go knight e5, and now he plays move c5. Now, what I was hoping was that Wei Yi would be perhaps a little bit unfamiliar with this variation. He hasn't played it in a long time. I was just hoping to get a game. So I take, we get the trade, bishop c5, and now I play the move knight to e3. Now here Wei Yi plays the move knight bd7. Now at the board, I was a little bit confused at first because the main line here for black is to play the move pawn to c3, pawn takes pawn, and then knight b to d7 here. And after knight d3, this is a very complex position with a lot of play for both sides. But the argument here is that the pawn on c3 is a weakness for white, whereas if white is able to simply capture this pawn on c4, white keeps the pawn structure intact with the two pawns. But I was also having a sense of deja vu as well at the time because I felt like I had played this somewhere. Now, during the game, I couldn't quite recall exactly where I had played it. It was a little bit hazy, but in fact, my memory was not completely wrong because I actually had this position as black all the way back in the great year of 2013 against Alexander Grishuk from Russia in a FIDE Grand Prix event in Paris. Now, that was a whopping 12 years ago, and that shows just how advanced chess is these days. You see variations. You might play it 12 years ago. You might play it today. I might play something 20 years from now. You never really know, but it's very difficult to remember everything crystal clearly. So here I play knight takes c4, we get rook b8, I go knight a5, knight e5, and now I play this move knight ec4. Now this is simply a bad move, but what's really funny about this is that during the game I didn't realize, but in fact I was playing the exact same moves that Alexander Grishuk played against me in the aforementioned game in 2013. Here, however, Wei Yi decides to play the move knight takes c4 after a bit of a think. It was clear that this was not the move that he was expecting, as he had been blitzing every move out up to this point. Now, probably Wei Yi was expecting castles, b6, knight b3, and something like bishop e7 and knight d4 here. But after bishop b7, it's very, very hard to argue that white has any advantage in this endgame. I mean, computer says it's like 0.8 or 0.9, or 0.08, I should say, or 0.09. Just not a whole lot going on here after knight c6. Just very symmetrical pawn structure, not a lot of play. And probably this sort of speaks to how I simply did not get what I wanted. So I go for the move knight ec4, and now we get the move knight takes knight. In my game against Grishuk, I actually played bishop b4 check into king, bishop d2, takes, and after, I believe it was rook to d8, king c3, takes, b6, knight c6. There's this great move, bishop b7, attacking the bishop. Grishuk played king b3, but after takes, knight g4, f3, and knight to e3, I simply was a little bit better in this game in Paris from 2013. I did not win the game. It would be a draw, but black has no issues at all. So back to my game today. We get the move knight takes knight instead. I chop, and now we get the move bishop d7. And here I play the move bishop d2. Now this move is simply a terrible decision. Now what happened to me, I will say, in this game is obviously my opponent is moving very quickly, but I also got stuck in no man's land, kind of like my game against Fabiano, except with the roles reversed. Now, what I mean by that is that when you're playing with the white pieces, if the game is very equal or boring early, let's just say 10 to 15 moves in, you sometimes feel an obligation to try to create something. You need to prove an advantage, or you need to do something to make the game interesting versus making a very boring professional draw in 30 minutes. And in this situation, what I should have simply done is castled, and now after we move bishop to b5, simply gone b3. We get takes, b6, and white has no advantage at all. But after a move like bishop to f4 or even bishop b2, white should be completely fine here. You have the two b's here, and there's just nothing really going on. And the game probably would have ended very, very quickly. But instead, I play the move bishop d2, and this move is simply based on a pure miscalculation. We get bishop b5, rook c1, and now we have the move rook f d8. Now, what happened here, and it's embarrassing to say this, is that I think in my mind, I assumed there was some kind of big tactic here, like a knight a5 move, or knight e5, or b4, or a4, but ultimately it doesn't work, because if I go knight to a5 here, black can temporarily sack the bishop, with bishop takes pawn, checking the king on e1, and after I play this move, king takes f2, there's rook takes bishop on d2, I'm down a pawn here. Black has a great kebab on the second rank. The rook hits all the pawns here, and I'm in a world of hurt. So I spent forever before playing this move knight to a3. I'm going to give you guys some insight into my thought process. First thing is, I was thinking to myself, wait a second, these knight a5 moves, they don't work. There's bishop f2. What have I done? If I can't castle my king here, black has the two b's that are very menacing on the diagonal. The rook on d8, knight g4, maybe rook c8 as well. All of black's pieces have achieved perfect harmony, and I'm in a lot of trouble. Now, my first thought was, why not play the move knight to a3, which is ultimately what I did in the game. But I actually was afraid of takes, and the move rook bc8, and I thought I was simply in trouble here. If I try to play a move like rook takes rook, after rook takes with rook c2, black is doing very well, so I discarded this idea. So then I spent about 20-25 minutes looking for something else, anything to keep the game going. Now, the computer says after this move b4, it's apparently still kind of playable, but as a human, when you're down a lot of time and you see all these tactics and you've missed some stuff already, it's very hard to play such a move. Fortunately, after calculating a lot of variations, I ultimately came back to knight a3 because what I realized on the second go-around is that here, if black plays rook bc8, I can simply grab the juicer on b7, and it's not like I'm even better here, but I'm not going to lose the game. So I go knight a3, I attack both of these bishops, we get takes. Now Wei Yi plays b6, and here I play the move rook to b1, attacking the bishop. Wei Yi goes bishop a6, I play f3. Here I've got to try to castle my king manually. We get rook c8, rook b2, knight e8. And now after the move king to f2, I start to breathe a bit of a sigh of relief here because I figure with my king developed, the two bishops, I shouldn't be in much danger. But Wei Yi keeps going because I have these ugly double pawns on the edge of the board. He plays knight d6 with the idea of forking with knight c4. So here I play the move bishop b4. Wei Yi goes knight b5, and I have to admit, this was a great move from Wei Yi. Already here, I thought that I had saved the game. I thought I was completely fine after like knight c4 and rook c2. I actually thought I might even be able to try to claim an advantage with a double stack on the file and these great bishops on the diagonals in the long term. But Wei Yi plays knight b5, a phenomenal move, and now I realize I'm still in trouble here because black is trying to put this knight on c3 to hit the pawns on a2 and e2. There are also multiple forks with knight a4 and knight d1, but there's another very important point here as well, which is that if white is ever able to get rid of this double pawn on the a file here and open up the files, these two bishops are going to be very, very good in the endgame. So, back to the game. When Wei Yi plays knight b5, if I go a4 here, there's knight c3, forking all the pawns, and if I push the pawn forward, there's knight d1. It's spaghetti-o time. I'm going to have to sack the rook, but I'm going to lose no matter what. So I play rook to a1. Wei Yi goes knight c3. I move my king to dodge the fork here on d1. We get knight a4, and now I play the move rook d2. Now, the reason that black maintains an advantage in this position is that these pawns are glued to the two squares here. I can't get rid of them, so these pawns are always going to be a problem. So Wei Yi takes here, and now I play the move bishop takes after a bit of a think. Initially, I wanted to take the rook with my king here, but I was very concerned about this move f6 here, or even this move bishop b5 with ideas like a5 to attack this bishop, and I simply didn't feel very comfortable. So I take with the bishop, and now when I play this move, I thought I was reaching an endgame by force. I go f4, we get bishop c4, and now I play the move bishop b4. Wei Yi takes, I trade, and here I go for the move bishop b4. Now at this point, black is up a pawn here in this endgame, but with the two b's here and the chance to reach a bishop endgame, I thought I should be fine. So we get knight c5. I play bishop c2, Wei Yi goes f5, and now I play the move king d2. Now, all the way back here, when Wei Yi played bishop c4, I had already been calculating these endgames with knight c5, and my general view of this endgame is that if I trade the bishop for the knight in a situation like this, black probably has a chance to win with the extra pawn, but if I get a situation like in the game where he fixes a pawn on the same color as my bishop, I thought all these endgames with the trade should be a draw. Now, keep that in mind, because when I go king d2, king f7, here I make the very strange decision to play this move king c3. Now, my initial idea here was to simply trade the bishop for the knight, and I thought this endgame should simply be a draw here because of this pawn always being on a light square, and in fact, the computer completely agrees. But instead, like a total lunatic, after deciding this endgame should be a draw, I thought, why should I trade to an obvious draw when I can even play king c3 and get a simpler version? But after king c3 and the move knight b7, now I do not get a forced endgame with bishops on the board, and black threatens to start pushing the p with the extra pawn on the queen side. So I go king d4. We get a5. I play bishop e1. Wei Yi goes knight d6. I go bishop d3. Apparently here black is still a little bit better with king e7. I go bishop d3, stopping knight to b5, forking the king and the pawn. We get this maneuver. And now after king c6, I play the move bishop d4. Now again, we're in a scramble here at the end of the game. Both of us are low on time, but I was kind of unhappy with my decisions because even though this should still be a draw, I decided to eschew what was a dead draw, theoretical draw, which I should never lose for something where I'm down a pawn, and even if it should be a draw with perfect play, there are still some chances to make a mistake. So Wei Yi goes g6. I go bishop e5. We get bishop d5. Here I play e3, putting my last pawn on the opposite color of this bishop so that it cannot attack anything here. And now we get the move knight f7. I go bishop f6, and here Wei Yi plays move b5, and after this move, I knew that I would no longer lose the game, primarily because these pawns are now going to become targets on the queen side. You'll notice this bishop is always spying the pawn, and if black ever moves the knight to, say, h6, I can play bishop d8, and suddenly both the pawns are under massive pressure, and there's no risk at all for white. So I was very happy to see Wei Yi play b5, because now I go bishop e7, and at this point, in the back of my mind, I started getting a little bit optimistic that I might have a way to win this game just because of the time situation. So Wei Yi goes e5. I play bishop e2. We do a bunch of dilly-dallying here. Wei Yi keeps waiting with the bishops. And now finally he decides to take the pawn. Now, of course, Wei Yi could have simply made the draw by maneuvering the bishop back and forth. But the big issue for black here is that these pawns are always weaknesses. The knight doesn't have good squares because of the dark square bishop. And there's really no way to progress. But of course, at the same time, I am pushing on the clock here. And in fact, when Wei Yi played this move on, I think it was switch move, one of these moves, he got down to 2 seconds before executing the move, and he very nearly flagged. So we got pawn takes pawn. I take back. I think it was this move, in fact, e takes f4 that was played with 2 seconds on his clock. I take back, and now we get the move king d7. We do a bunch of dilly-dallying, and now Wei Yi plays bishop c6 to guard the pawn. Here I go bishop b6, Wei Yi plays a4, and now I go for the move king c3, trying to bring my king to the queen side to win this pawn on d6. Now here Wei Yi finally bails out. He plays knight d6, king b4, and the move knight c4, securing the draw. If Wei Yi were to be even very slightly sloppy and play a move like king e7, after king to b4, knight d6, bishop c5, I can trade, take the pawn on b5. I'm going to win the pawn on a4, and in fact, I'm going to win the game. But Wei Yi correctly plays knight d6, just puts the knight on c4, kills any chance of me winning this pawn. Basically, if I move the bishop, black will just sit and wait here. Eventually, I'm going to have to trade. And once we get to this situation with the opposite colored bishops here, this is simply a dead draw. So after knight c4, the game ends in a peaceful result. I have to say this was a very stressful game. I thought that I was in a lot of trouble from the get-go, but I held firm, I kept defending well, and the game ended with a solid result. Now in the Armageddon, I would have some slight chances in the game. I would be able to get Wei Yi low on time, but ultimately he was too solid, and he would save the game and make a draw, and that means that I end up getting 1 point out of 3 today. Now, you're probably thinking, well, this is too short a recap, right? It's only been 13 minutes. There's got to be more. And sure enough, you guys, as promised, there is more. Now, we're going to be taking a look at another one of the classical games being played today between the 5-time world champion, Magnus Carlsen from Norway, and Arjun Erigaisi from India, currently ranked number 3. So Magnus with the white pieces opens with the move c4, and Arjun decides to play the move c5. Now this is what is known as the symmetrical English, because when white plays c4, which is the English opening, black goes c5, making the mirror, so it's symmetrical. So we get g3, Arjun plays g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, and now we get the move knight c3, knight c6, and here Magnus plays the move rook b1. Now, some of you guys might recall that all the way back in the great year of 2016, none other than Hikaru Nakamura played this line with e3, e6, and d4 against Fabiano Caruana in the first round of the 2016 candidates being held in Moscow, Russia. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So here Magnus goes rook b1. We get knight f6, a3, and now we get the move a5 from Arjun. Now Magnus here is trying to push p on the queen side and expand here and create threats on the b file with the rook and the bishop. So we get a5. Magnus goes d3, we get e6, and here we have the move knight to f3 being played. Arjun castles, and Magnus plays move bishop e3, pressuring the pawn on c5. Arjun goes queen e7, and now we get the move knight to a4, attacking the pawn. Now, I did see the game very briefly around this moment. I thought already here the position was potentially favorable for Magnus here. It feels like he's getting the situation he wants. He's got the bishops on the diagonals, b4 ideas, and it's a game about finesse. So we get d6 guarding the pawn. Magnus decides to castle in this position, and now we get the move rook b8, and Magnus goes d4. Now this is apparently not the best move. Computer wants knight b6. I'm kind of curious actually why Magnus did not go for this, because after a move like, let's say, queen c7, knight takes c8, and rook takes c8, white has the two b's or the bishop pair in the situation. Probably not a whole lot for white, but it feels like something where you're going to keep the game going. Instead, Magnus plays d4. Arjun takes, and now we get the move knight takes pawn. Now, the computer really does not like pawn takes pawn. It much prefers b6, keeping the pawn structure intact, and black can then go for the fianchetto with bishop b7 to oppose the bishop on g2. Instead, we get takes, takes. Arjun trades everything off, and now he goes for this move b5. Magnus trades, and here he plays move knight to c3. We get rook b8, and Magnus plays queen a4. Now, what's very clear to me about this game is that Arjun is not in it to be solid, try to make a draw. He wants a big fight with Magnus. He wants to go after him. He is not afraid at all. So there is a big imbalance here. White has the queenside pawns going up the board. Black has the big center here. So there is definitely an imbalance. So we get bishop b7. Magnus trades, takes a5, we get e5, bishop e3, and Arjun plays move d5, trying to build a big black center and pushing the pawns forward. Here, Magnus goes bishop g5, and Arjun plays move d4, we get takes, takes, knight to d5, and now Arjun plays move bishop g5. Now, all these moves have been the best moves by both sides for the last 5 or 6 moves, but now Magnus plays knight b4, which is another excellent decision. We get bishop d2, the top computer move, takes, 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 and now we get the move rook d1. Now, dust has settled a little bit here. We're headed towards an endgame. White has 5 pawns, black has 4 pawns. Objectively, this should be a draw, quote unquote, but it is an endgame. And as I've said many times in my recaps, Magnus Carlsen is the greatest endgame player of all time, and he always finds a way to work some magic, or so we think. So here we get rook e8. Magnus decides to go queen f4 here. This move is to avoid the endgame, because after queen takes d4 here, black can probably trade, and after rook e2, I thought b4, rook b5 should be a draw. Apparently it's not a dead draw, but I still think that in a position like this, with ideas like rook f5, the rooks being very active for black, and the inability to force the pawn forward, there should be great drawing chances. So we get queen to f4. Arjun takes, we get rook takes d4, now we get the move queen b7, and this is the first big mistake of the game. Now, the computer wants to move queen to b3, which stops white from ever pushing the pawn forward, and I think the reason is that after queen to f6, black can go rook e to e8 here. The rook's cut off threats on the back rank, but now the pawn on b2 can never march up the board. Instead, we get queen b7. Magnus plays queen f6. Here we get the move rook e6. And now Magnus goes rook d8. Now, at this point, Magnus is simply outplaying Arjun. Arjun has played effectively a perfect game up until the last 2 moves. Queen b3 was the best move, and now rook e6 is a big mistake here. Computer wants to move h5 instead. I'm not sure why this is better after b4 versus the game, but apparently this is what he should have done. So Arjun makes 2 mistakes. He plays queen b7 and he plays rook e6. And just like that, after the move rook to d8, as you guys can tell from the valuation part, it is gone. Magnus Carlsen is on his way to a victory. So we get the trade, king to g7, and now Magnus plays queen to d4, checking the king. Arjun goes king g8, and Magnus plays move b4, and at this point, Magnus is now pushing his p. He's got the rook behind the pawn, and a very active and centralized queen on d4, which creates the right triangle. Arjun goes h5, and now Magnus keeps pushing his p with b5. Arjun plays rook b6, and here we get the move rook to e1, the best move in the position here, as Magnus is infiltrating on the back rank. Arjun plays queen b8, and I'll be honest, at this point during the game, I bet Arjun thought he was okay, but this just shows how good Magnus is. He plays rook to e8, you get takes, takes, and you're probably thinking, well, can't black just check the king with the queen and make a draw? As you can tell from the valuation bar, Magnus Carlsen has calculated this perfectly. His king is going to wander up the board, and this is simply a winning queen and pawn endgame. Now, if black were to play a quiet move like king h7, white goes queen c6, and after queen e1, king g2, the queen covers all the checking squares on the diagonal. It means that white is free to push the pawn up the board, and the rest will be basic. So we get check, king g2, check, king f1, check, king e1, and Magnus just has calculated this perfectly. The king is going to run out here. It just keeps going up the board as a straight path up to c7 and b8, and there's just nothing black can do. If black checks on c4, like in the game, the king keeps going forward. If you were to check this way, the king continues to run, and it just gets to safety here on b8, and then eventually on the a7 square, and white is going to find a way to push the pawn up the board. So Arjun goes queen c4. We get king to e5. Arjun plays king g7, and now Magnus plays move h4. Not the only way to win. Queen c6 also would have been good, but h4 is completely fine too, because the queen guards all the pawns guard each other, and now white is free to move the king. Arjun plays queen d3, Magnus goes queen c5, and here Arjun plays queen f5, and after king to d6, Magnus Carlsen gets the victory. Arjun Erigaisi resigns because after any check, the king runs to c7. There are no checks here on e7 or e5, and white is just free to push p with this b pawn going up the board. The king supports the pawn, and it's just GG, why not? So, what to say about this game other than it is a phenomenal performance from Magnus. Arjun played a nearly perfect game. He made 2 inaccuracies, playing queen b7 instead of queen b3, and then playing rook e6 instead of h5, and that was all it took, was 2 slight inaccuracies for Magnus to capitalize and get a beautiful, beautiful win. And this comes back to one thing that I've said before. People ask me about, quote-unquote, playing chess with Magnus. One of the reasons you don't want to just get in a position is because when it comes down to the pure abilities of just playing the best moves, Magnus is absolutely ruthless, and we saw it in this game. Arjun played a great game. He made 2 mistakes. 2 minor mistakes, not outright blunders, minor mistakes, and that's all Magnus needed to get the dub. So a very, very impressive win from Magnus today. This means he now moves into the lead here in Norway chess, perhaps tied with Fabiano, depending on what happened in Fabio's Armageddon game, but just a masterclass from Magnus in technique to show how you win with 1 extra pawn. So Magnus gets the big dub. That's going to do it for a round 4 recap from Norway chess today. Tomorrow is going to be a rest day, so there will be no recaps. But on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to getting a bit of a break before the tournament continues with round 5, when I will play against Arjun after the rest day, so that's going to be a big game. But at any rate, hope you guys have enjoyed the recap. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with more videos in 2 days, or at least from this tournament. So, hope you enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your evening, and keep it real. See you guys. Bye.